We're jumping in with some board gaming tactica, the idea of controlling the random. Independent of the system, when we look at the back end of board game mechanics, when we look at the DNA, the moving parts, the gears, there are elements that are out of our control. There are elements based on dice, based on the draw of the card, based on some sort of unknown mechanic that are going to give us some decision points or are going to affect gameplay. And it's a little bit challenging to develop a strategy, again, independent of the narrative, when there's so much random hitting you. And admittedly, some games are extremely random. An example from my own collection would be Talisman. And other games, there are elements of randomness, but you do have a lot of control and ways to mitigate it. Maybe playing Settlers, on the opposite end, where everything is under your control and essentially it's just following a decision tree that you can figure out right from the beginning to the end. And most board gaming titles will fall somewhat in the center. So we're going to jump in over the next 4 vlogs. I'm going to pull down from my collection a bunch of titles that we're going to explore and look for the random. And I wanted to do this with some real examples, but also show a template, even if you don't have these titles in your collection, to show a template how if you sit down and you can look through the rules or you can look through a playthrough video to identify these stress points, to identify these random points, and then minimize them the best that you can. Depending on the system, you can't always eliminate them. But this strategy is going to allow you to be competitive. And by competitive, this means maybe you're playing a co-op narrative type game where you all win or lose together, like Zombicide Invader or any of the Zombicide titles. Or perhaps it's one against many or a competition game, maybe an Overlord type system like Dungeon Saga. We're going to look to control. So the title we're looking at is Runebound. And I've got the picture here of the map, the board that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the movement dice. We're going to look at market options. And then we're going to look at combat itself. This game has a number of unique features. I've pulled all those topic points in to look and to explore. So let's jump in first with the movement dice and how this works. And the reason why I pulled in Runebound 3rd edition, I also enjoy 2nd, is there are a number of very, very unique mechanics to this game. And those mechanics kind of capture the imagination, but they are random elements. And they're a little bit sneaky because they're innovative, they're different, but being innovative and different, it's easy to forget, like, hey, this is a random generation machine. So let's kind of hack it and let's kind of develop that tactica. So the first aspect is movement. The way the game mechanics work is you have a number of dice that have corresponding terrain hexes. So this is a hex-based exploration game where you're going to go on quests, you're going to get magic items, you're going to level up with your character, and you're facing a threat at the end. In the core set, it's Margrath, the High Dragon Lord, just a massive dragon, or you're going to fight Vorakesh, the Necromancer. Movement is controlled by rolling these dice. Characters, most of them roll 3, a few will roll 4. And then after you roll the dice, you match up the hexes that are showing with the hexes that are in front of you. So if you're in open plains and you roll 2 open plains and a hill, you can move 2 plains and then 1 hill if there's a nearby. If you're looking to cross over the mountains and you roll the dice and you don't get any mountain symbols, then you can't go over the mountains. And the dice are weighted in that there are more open plains, there are more light hills than there are mountain and swamps. And that represents the law of averages, how they've determined the game, in that you're going to roll the dice and less mountains are going to come up because it takes more time to go over the mountains. So tactically speaking, this is a game where you need to get places to fight monsters, to go on quests, to pick up items, or just to be in the right place at the right time. And knowing when you have to cross over mountains, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, unless you roll legendary. But moving, understanding these dice are important. So let's look at some of the ways that we can increase this, because every turn, your character has 3 actions. So you roll the set of dice and move, that's 1 action. You encounter a quest, that takes 2 actions. You can go to a market. If you're in a city, that's an action. You can rest and heal. You have a finite number of options per turn. Occasionally you can get another action. Occasionally you'll be delayed and have an action taken away. But I want to move the most efficient way as possible. So naturally, picking the pathfinding is going to optimize your dice roll. Knowing that for the most part, you're going to roll plains and light hills, that's kind of where I want to go. But occasionally you have to move through the mountains for quests or to encounter an object, or maybe as quests get taken up on the board by the other players, you're going to kind of gravitate towards that area. The 2 ways to control the random, to influence the random: items and rerolls, or abilities and rerolls. And this is the first thing that we're going to look in any type of system. How do I get a reroll, if it's possible? And how can I get some sort of item, ability, tech level, something in the narrative that will increase my ability? Well, Runebound, you can buy certain items that will add an extra movement dice. You can level up your character and train skills if you happen to encounter the correct skill and add an extra movement die. Now, you can never have above the full cap, but you can add +1 or +2. That's going to give you more generation to move in the open fields and light hills and plains, but also it's going to make things much faster to move through the mountains. So we're going to look to increase our pool of dice if possible. Another way to get a reroll, now some of the characters will have a special ability as a tracker. They'll let you have a reroll. That is very, very powerful. There's an example of a persistent ability that is always on, that one of the characters, once per turn, you can reroll any of your movement dice. That is huge, because the game is about getting places. That, more than anything else, is massive, because for other characters to get that, you would have to spend gold. You would have to trade in your adventure cards to gain abilities. That's taking finite resources in the game, also because it runs on a timer, and gives it to you automatically. The other way to do it is by exerting. Characters have a number of cards that they can exert. You get rid of a card, it allows you to get a reroll. This is an example of being able to efficiently use that exert to reroll. Now, the exert works in other areas of the game. So if I have 3 exertion cards, I don't want to spend them right away. I mean, I want to kind of bank them, but that's an option. And of course, there's ways to get more of those cards by resting and training. So that's the first piece with the dice. We've got the random. It's a random-based movement system. Some hexes are easier to move through than others. How do I control that? How do I identify in the rules for that to be efficient? So we have those. A final layer on that is to move through the roads and the cities. You can use any die. So if I get to roll 3 or 4 a turn and I'm on the roads, I just can roll and move those aspects. So also understanding that, sticking to the roads as much as possible to move you up and down and then left and right on the top of the board and the bottom of the board, that is the most efficient way to move. And often, sometimes as you move to certain quests, you have to make a decision with the random. So at the top of the board, there's some hills, there's some mountains, there's some mines. Do I cut up to the top of the board directly through there? And if I roll really, really well, I'm going to get there quicker. Or do I go up the roads and it takes a little bit longer, but it's consistent? I know how long it's going to take, versus if I directly try to power through with the dice moving through the hills and dense mountains, I might have to exert. I might have to get some rerolls. I might not have that. So this is an example of sometimes things might take a little bit longer with the known, or do I embrace the unknown? Side note, my player personality, my chaotic neutral personality, I always roll on the dice. I always accept the challenge. Like, I'll power through, and the dice gods love me. I'll take that risk. If there's a chance for risk, I will take it, but that's not always the most optimal. So now let's jump into combat. Let's look at combat for this game. Combat involves taking these runes, these cardboard tokens that have symbols on it, shaking them up, casting them out on the table. They fly out on the table. They go all over the place. And then you see what you have. And the runes are a combination of attack value with axes or magic value with symbols, and they do 1 point of damage for every face-up rune that you have. There's blocking with shields. There's the ability to double your attack, cause double damage. There's an ability to flip a token from one side to the other, so maybe you want to flip one to defense or flip one to attack. And all of the characters start with 3 base runes, and they're all a little bit different, of course, depending on the class. Some are more defensive, some are more magic, some are more evade. And then as you go through the game, what I really enjoy about Runebound is as you gain magic items, you gain the corresponding rune token. And that token has abilities. You add it to your hand. So it's really unique where a lot of narrative RPG games, magic items are just like a +1 stat boost, or they change something a little bit. This, you're actually physically getting an item, and the disc has a little picture of the sword or the spell book or the rune. And as your pile of runes grow, you really physically, the analog, feel your character grow. So obtaining magic items is huge, because what we need to do as we fight monsters and as we go through encounters, we need to generate enough attack value or enough defensive value we don't get killed. We need to generate a certain magic value. Now, there's also surges. This is a Fantasy Flight game, and there's the little lightning bolt. So some of the runes have a lightning bolt which triggers a surge, and that allows to activate special abilities or character abilities. So often what you'll see is surges can be very powerful. I start off with maybe 1 on the base tokens. I want to get the spell book. I want to get the runes. I want to get the magic robes that give me more surges so I can activate that. So we're looking and saying if there's a positive or negative, the tokens are binary. It's one side or the other. That's it. It's not a D6. It's 50-50. Then to break through, I need to get more of these. So we need to get quests. We need to focus on obtaining gold to buy things. Now we're going to look at the store. We're going to look at shopping in a second. But being able to generate more of these tokens is really, really important. Now, as we quest, what we're going to see is controlling the random. You gain items by going into a market. And there's, at the start of the game, you draw 3 random items. You put them in the market. Every time you go to market, you draw a new item, and then you either have to discard one or buy one. There are also quests that will let you randomly draw one or search through the market deck. The quests are not the most efficient because they're in this deck of quest cards. On average, not giving away any spoilers, they'll pop up maybe 1 or 2 a game. If you're playing with 4 players, if you're playing with 5 players, and a quest gets pulled up for that, then that's an opportunity that you're not going to get for that quest. There's also the fact that you don't know when it's going to necessarily pop up in the deck. Now you could figure, okay, the deck is X number of cards. It hasn't popped up yet. It's getting smaller and smaller. I'm counting cards. You could kind of keep track of that. I mean, that is a potential tactica. But that's a random that we can't control. So this is the first thing where you'll see certain gaming systems, the random you can't control or influence. So if it happens, I'm going to take advantage of it. If it doesn't happen, then I can't bank on that, right? So going back to these runes, I need to increase my pile of runes. I'm going to go on quests. I'm going to try and make it happen, but I can't count on that as a strategy and say, I'm guaranteed to get 2 quests per game. That's 2 tokens right there. That's just too random. I got to let that go. What I can control is the market deck. Being able to see, being able to identify early on if I'm a warrior class, if I'm a magic class, if I'm kind of a rogue / thief / ranger, based on the random population at the beginning of the game, what's going to be most popular? What city do I need to kind of hang out, do the quests so that I can buy that item. This is important because, again, you only have set number of actions per turn. I don't want to hang out at the top of the board doing quests, then I run down to the bottom to grab an item. I want to kind of hang out at a base of operation, purchase an item, and then move on somewhere else with it. Now we need gold. We need gold to buy the magic items. It's a gold-based economy. The two ways to earn gold, most likely ways to earn gold. In each of the market decks, there are certain cards, trade goods, which you can take these goods. Sometimes it's equipment, sometimes it's mining gear, sometimes it's provisions, sometimes it's luxury goods. And if you buy them or take them and then deliver them to another town or another settlement, you can sell them. This is an example of random that is controllable. These cards appear randomly in the market decks because I draw from a deck of cards, but I know once I grab them and I deliver them, I get that reward. And I know more or less the finite amount of time that it's going to take. So if I'm in one city and I pick up luxury goods that are worth 5 gold and I need to go to the nearest castle, which is 10 hexes away, that's known. Now, can I navigate those 10 hexes on the road? Can I go through terrain that I can at least control the dice and not like try to run through the mountains? I have some control over it. The second way to earn gold is to fight monsters. I mean, it is a fighting game. Quests in the game, or I should say encounters. There's 3 types of encounters in Runebound. Fighting encounters, quests, and social encounters. And these are the little colored tokens on the board at different aspects in different places. So if you do you land on a crossed sword space, you're going to be fighting a monster. If you land on a little torch, that's a quest. You're going to get a quest. Go somewhere, expend some dice, get a reward. If you get the little communication envelope, that's a social interaction. You know, you encounter a miner, or you encounter a traveler, you encounter a bard, and you get to kind of test some skills. So in fighting, and we're going to talk about the quests in a second, the challenge with fighting is you don't really know what you're going to fight. There's a Fantasy Flight, it's pulling in from Terranoth, so you've got orcs, and you've got cave trolls, and you've got dragons, and you've got ferox, and all the other type of monsters to fight. Some of them hit really, really hard. Some of them not so hard. So now what this means is, on average, if it's 2 or 3 gold that I'm going to get rewarded, I have to fight. If I get knocked out, then I have to expend time resting and healing. You don't get killed in the game, but you get knocked out. Now I lose actions. And again, this game has a counter. You have time moving forward, and at the end of the counter track, the boss spawns and you got to fight the boss. So if I get knocked out, not only do I not get the gold, but now I have to expend some actions getting back into the game. If I get wounded, a lot of battles you will win, but you'll be wounded. Now you have to potentially heal up. That spends resources in terms of a finite system where you're on a timer track. So there's the random element. Now let's talk about controlling the random with these tokens. The monsters, when they fight, they also cast similar tokens. And if you're playing solo, you can do this yourself. If you're playing in a group, another player casts the tokens and interprets them. And their attack, their defense, their surges. Act 1, so the timer track is Act 1. When it gets to the end, it goes to Act 2. Things accelerate at the end of Act 2. The boss appears, and you have the final showdown, super fight. Act 1, the tokens are set. When you go to Act 2, you add a new, more powerful token to the monsters. So it makes them even more powerful. And the idea is, on the narrative side, the characters are advancing, and the monster at the end is becoming more active, so the monsters are becoming more powerful. I mean, the theme goes very good, but this is a random that now is getting injected, and they're becoming more powerful. So how do I control this? What this means is, Act 1 is when I want to fight the monsters. If I'm going to go and fight monsters because it's an efficient way to get gold, meaning I'm going to look and deliver, I'm going to go to a city, grab the trade goods, and then as I deliver them along that path where I have to go, I'm going to fight any monsters I encounter. And then when I get to the city, I sell the trade goods and I'll rest up. I mean, that's an efficient use of controlling the random. I want to fight early on. When it gets to round 2, things are going to become much more challenging, much more difficult. I really don't want to fight anything on Act 2. Act 2, I want to switch to social quests and utilize that. So you can do these at any time, but understanding when to do the quests to control the random is big. So those are some elements. And again, just using Runebound as an example, looking through the rules, looking through the flow of the game and how it plays, and looking and saying, what are these random elements? How can I influence it? How can I control it? How can I minimize it? How can I make it work to my advantage as much as possible? And in that checklist, if there are places I can't control, I can't do, then maybe I don't want to encounter it that way. All right, part 2, part 3, part 4. We're going to pull down some other titles. And if you guys have any requests for analysis where we're going to look at the random in various games, shoot it up into the comments there. If I've got the title in my collection or I've had a chance to play it. I'm very fortunate to belong to a board gaming group, and we play, and plugged into that community. I play with some other friends. They have titles that I regularly play that there's no reason for me to purchase because they have the titles with all the expansions and the Kickstarter exclusives. So I just play their titles. So it might be a game that I've played that we can talk about the random, even if I don't necessarily have it in my collection. But let's build that list in the comments, and we'll explore it and take a look.